Hello, and welcome to the Procurement Game Changers podcast, brought to you by Consulting Quest. Ever wondered how the leaders get it done? What differentiates them from the rest of us? Let's tune in and learn from the best leaders in the procurement space. Let's do it! And now, over to your host, Helen Lafitte.
Hello, and welcome to the Procurement Game Changers, the podcast for leaders that make a difference. Today, we'll talk about how to find the right profile for your procurement group. And to discuss that topic, I have the great pleasure to receive Aslan Akyol. Aslan is the Chief Purchasing Officer and a member of the Executive Board at Stash. Aslan has 20 years of working experience with many companies. He is currently with Stash, a grocery delivery company that delivers groceries within 10 minutes to your doorstep with no minimum order value and at supermarket prices. We're glad to have you with us today. So welcome to the show, Aslan.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast, and I hope I can contribute something meaningful to it.
I'm sure you will. So Aslan, could you tell us what led you to procurement?
Okay, I guess probably my mother must have been contributed somehow. She always negotiated everywhere, I remember. And whether she knew the language or not, I mean, she came to Switzerland about more than 20 years. She was about 22 years old, I guess. And she was trying to negotiate down everything. And that's probably why I applied at the end as a young man in purchasing for my first job in engine material purchasing at Swiss Technical Services, which then became SR Techniques. And I found it super interesting. And that's why I guess after a few years, I was able to take on larger projects. And when I remember some examples were the tendering and negotiations for the Airbus A340 fleet with Pratt & Whitney engines and the Rolls-Royce engines. So that was really fun, and I remember a lot of work and nights and the weekends, and we have chosen then Rolls-Royce at the end for the A340 fleet of Swiss Air. And also, of course, for me, very interesting was the maintenance contract call for tenders on the JT9D 704 J2 engines of the Boeing 747. At that time with KLM Dutch and JAL Japan Airlines. I met a lot of people and experienced different cultures from all over the world. And nevertheless, I had to decide that after 11 years, I'm going to change my industry. And I went into telecommunication back in 1999 to Diox, a new player on the Swiss telecom market. Found it roughly after the liberalization in 1997. And that was really fun because leaving is a really deep marginal flight maintenance industry and then go to telecommunication was a bit of a culture shock for me. Whereas before I had to fight for every cent, and at the Diox people were talking like millions as it were cents. And that's why for me it was like, wow, everything was normal, a few millions, it's normal. And within a very short time of 2 years, I guess, Diox had then almost more turnover than the SR Techniques after 60 years in business. That was really for me incredible at that time for a young person. And I was responsible there for the network area. And my first big success was in the UMTS tender back in the year 2000. I had to organize 60 half-day meetings with Nokia networks and Ericsson networks. And that was just jumping around. And at the end, I guess, even asking me to set up a strategic purchasing department of Diox and Sunrise after the merger back in 2001. And in the UMTS tender, I negotiated PowerPoint presentations. That was also something which I really remember. So you were negotiating of millions, even billions, which was only on PowerPoint, and nothing existed. Everything was just on PowerPoint, and really exciting years. Nevertheless, thought why not to try another industry again, and so I was really lucky to go after 11 years to Migros, And Migros is the largest retailer here, and private employer in Switzerland with approximately 100,000 employees and 15 times the turnover of Sunrise. And a second culture shock for me at that time, after the fast-moving and dynamic telecommunications, Migros was like a snail compared to Sunrise. And was starting the head of supply and contract management, then take over the strategic procurement department in 2014, and then transformed it to 19 by 2019, bringing it really on par level with the FMCG companies, because Migros had no clue about what is the profit per square meter and what is the profit there, and that's why I guess for a shelf meter, and that's why we had to take new software into it, data analysts, business analysts, and then actually transform the whole department and get in new people. And I guess that was a quite good success at the end. So said I promised what I had to do back in 2019, and then I said I want to do something really fun. And now I landed at the startup Stash, the quick commerce industry, in 2021, and now here I am.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's very interesting to see how from one industry to the next there might be some differences, and as a procurement leader you have to learn about them, and still you're still doing the same work, right? And that's something that we will discuss.
I'm riding our bicycle as well, Sam, because the executive board has to go once a month and write also and deliver out all the orders from our customers. Not
that's quite the difference.
In the background, you see actually our bike and driving, and trying to find within 10 minutes. So we have to feel also what's going to happen really at the front.
That's interesting. So we're going back to the topic today, and we'll start with the fact that compared to other functions like finance, marketing, IT, or in HR, procurement is always fighting for more visibility and our attention from the executive committee. And indeed, procurement is not well understood by executive. It's not taught in school. Do students there learn about
Correct.
Finance, marketing strategy, even technology, but not procurement. So most executive, unless they are in the supply chain function, don't know much about what procurement does. And as a result, most companies don't hire the right profiles, and they often end up with the wrong teams. So what are the mistakes to avoid? How do you find the right profile for procurement? That is what we're going to discuss about today with you, Aslan. So first questions, well, in your opinion, what are the pitfalls when hiring people for procurement roles?
When I remember really back all these years now, I guess for me, it was always like the typical phrase, like in advertising for a vacancy, for example, like, yeah, many years of purchasing experience in this and that industry. For me, it was all like, it's not a qualitative statement. Just as little like somebody would say, I have leadership experience. Also, this is not a qualitative statement. That's why that was always a pitfall, looking for people just being in that industry. And I have also some examples from mainly in the financial industry where I have seen that these people, unfortunately, had nothing to say there. But to be honest, on the other hand, the question is really only valid if purchasing really has to be successful in that company. Because we are somehow faced with the reality of companies, like who decides really what success of purchasing is or should be really? The executives who have like little knowledge on procurement, or the fear to lose decision power and reputation on the market. I have a very interesting example. I remember back head of marketing communications. His name was Beat, and he was really, he was really throwing curses at us and said that he will hardly find a good job on the market after we have negotiated the advertising agency fees down by 30%. And we will be responsible if he never finds a good job on the market, and so on and so forth. So really interesting things.
What is the right profile for procurement? And I'm talking about soft skill, hard skill. So what is that profile that you're looking for?
I guess the right profile can't be really advertised, okay? It is like an experienced interviewer could find the right person out from an unusual but interesting CV, for example, and also from face-to-face interviews. That's why I personally only at HR only filtered the applications when it was like really obvious that the person just wanted to have an application for the job center. So it's like I'm an hairdresser, but I want to be in purchasing, for example. My philosophy, I guess, was really when you know how to buy, you can buy everything. But of course, there are exceptions. I mean, jobs where you need like physical or natural skills, like sense of taste, sensitive senses of smell, like when you are a coffee or cacao buyer, or for example, also when you have to buy ingredients and flavors, for example, the perfume industry. But I guess for me, it was like the mix of people. It was also important. And there's Meredith Belbin actually once described his 9 roles of good teams.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like a he called resource investigator, team worker, a plant is like seeding, and growing. Also monitor, evaluate, shaper, implementer, whatever, completer, finisher. Actually, I took it simply because I'm not a professor. So I always had a visionary person. Sometimes it was me, sometimes it was another person. A networker, very important. I also have a very good example there. An implementary person, like being able to implement everything, and also a person like who's analyzing it in a structured way. And of course, somehow, let's say, the good soul of the team. Okay, so the person who can always have the ability to connect all the team members, even if they are totally different. And I guess these 5 roles you should have in a very successful purchasing team.
So you mentioned that person who is a networker. So that's interesting because in a previous podcast, we discussed about the importance for procurement to build a network internally and with suppliers. So could you develop a little bit that? And you mentioned that you have an example, so maybe you can give that example to explain more that role in particular.
Okay. I remember when I started back at Sunrise in the telecommunication industry, the key account manager of a big telecom network infrastructure provider. That guy had, and I'm probably remembering correctly, that guy had 216 direct contacts to the company. He knew everything much better than anybody in the company. He knew exactly what the CEO is doing, the CFO, what the CMO, the CTO, whatever. And he knew what the strategy we have. So he knew actually everything. And so how can it be that a supplier knows much more than anybody else in the company? Mm-hmm. So that's why I said, that's clear. He was an incredible professional networker. But that's why I had one guy, my team then, which I hired coming from Siemens. And that guy was like, it was everywhere, every party. You have to go because you have to control what our marketing guys say, what our network people say. You have to go to supplier events and get information, collect them. And from that time on, actually, we had the best and the first knowledge, what's going to happen on the market before anybody else in the company. And that's why I guess it's important to have that networker.
It's interesting. It's like underground business intelligence, if I hear correctly.
Yeah, somehow, correct.
Well, so we see that you have several roles in your teams, and then you need to identify, even if on paper those profiles might look the same, they might not fall into the same role. And then at the end, you need a team that makes sense, right? That's what I hear from what you say. And I have a question though, and you mentioned that briefly before in the fact that there are limitations to on certain categories. So I would just expand that. Is it just true for all categories beyond those limitations that you mentioned? And then are there specificities in the profile that you seek for a company like yours today, for Stash, for instance? Are there some specificities today?
I guess first of all, for us, actually, it is like really important to see trends here, okay, to emphasize with our customers. And also, as a startup, actually, you have to sell hope, okay? So you never know when your money is away and the burn rate is too high, whatever. But that's for us important. Nevertheless, I guess to the first part of your question about, is it like for all categories? As I mentioned before, also, you can't really do that everywhere, because when you are working in government, for example, it might be different. When you're working in a financial industry, it might be different. When you're working in for example, the tobacco industry, it might be different again. But that's why I guess it's you have to know really in what industry you are, what are, let's say, the most important points you have to consider for your own function. And that's why you can't say, yeah, category IT is everywhere the same. It's not. So even IT might be totally different when you are working in government.
Yeah, so it's kind of a foundation that you can build on. Be clear that what is important actually is beyond the right profile on paper, is to make sure that that person has the right mindset, or the right attitude to procurement, and then that you have the right roles for your team in your industry, in your category, in your type of company. That's what I understand. So it's kind of be flexible. There is not one fits all team that works for everyone. And you said before, it based on your goal. Do you want to be successful as a procurement team? That's kind of the ultimate question. I hope as procurement leaders, we want to be successful, right? I hope that's the case, but that's not always.
And sometimes actually, it's really like the feeling you might have as an interviewer. I remember a guy, actually, he was harvesting kiwis and whatever in New Zealand, and before he was working in a bar as a waiter. It was a discotheque, right? A club, a nightclub. He was working as a waiter, collecting money and saving money for his world trip, whatever. And that guy, he could not speak English at that time. Okay, so he went on a world tour without being able to speak English. And I said, like, a guy actually on a world tour, getting back and finding always a solution for every situation in his life or on his journey might be an interesting person. So I invited him for an interview. And that guy became of our most creative executives in my purchasing team. Mm-hmm. And still, he's still the most creative person I know actually working or used to work in purchasing. Yeah, and actually, nobody probably would have invited him to an interview. Really, nobody.
Yeah, I hear you. You have to see really beyond the profile on paper. So on that, I can totally. I agree with you totally. It's I don't think that someone would have hired me in procurement if I said so before, because of my profile. But here I am. So where do you find the right profile for your procurement role? Is it your network? Do you have spontaneous candidates, internet platform, headhunters? How do you go to find these profiles?
Ooh, I probably I used all of them, really. It's based sometimes on the time constraints you have. I used headhunters. Was the right choice? I used sometimes you need thousands of interviews until you really have your right candidate for the challenging job. I mean, I remember also there a guy. Also, the interesting example. He was actually unemployed. Okay, when I invited him for the interview, he was unemployed. He came for a very, very small company, like maybe 15 people. Used to purchase, I guess, little screens or whatever for the car navigation system. And I said, if somebody has to struggle, okay, every day being tiny and getting still nevertheless being able to get a very good prices, very good conditions, whatever from Asia, although you are very small and you're struggling and doing and working and fighting. I invited that guy, and he used to be as half Spanish, half German, I guess. And the first interview was very nervous, but he seemed very clever, very smart. The second interview, I told him I felt he was really nervous at the last time, and he said, "Yeah, you're right." And in the middle of that second interview, I said, "Hey, you're half Spanish, right?" Yes. Okay. What would you say if I say now, step on the table and dance a flamenco for me, please? And his immediate answer was like, yes, Mr. Akyol, if you dance with me, of course I will do that. And I said, okay, you're hired. So it depends the attitude, how fast he can react, and that's much more important than somebody he would be totally astonished, like, very interesting question. That's why I guess it's really the feeling. It's not clear what is the best source.
Yeah, so that's why it's hard. You have to go around, do interviews, and meet people. We said that before. It's not what they have on paper. It's really the mindset, the attitude. That's what I understand.
And he's now like a really head of worldwide purchasing of a really big banking company, bank.
So the attitude was all it was. So if for newcomers to the procurement community, and I know that there are quite a lot that are listening to you and watching the podcast, do you have any advice on how to grow as a buyer when you don't have the technical knowledge of the product, of the service that you're supposed to buy?
I guess remembering that what Steve Jobs once said, stay hungry, stay foolish, okay? It's not the same, but it's somehow valid also for the part of a buyer as well. I always listen carefully and ask a lot. The more you ask, the more you know. Listen and ask the supplier, listen and ask your colleagues, and sometimes listen and ask yourself, am I doing really the right thing? But I guess I found out that many people do not listen because they want to make their case and do not ask because they then believe the competence will be questioned. But I guess without listening carefully and asking, you don't learn. I mean, that was somehow the same way at school.
Yeah, that's very true. And I agree with you on that fact that you can learn every day. Even if you are an established leader or a seasoned professional, you can still learn even about your own, subject matter, because things are changing, new methodologies are coming in, and so it's always an opportunity to learn more and to educate yourself on things that you might think it's not right, and then you discover it is, or the other way around. So I think this is
sure.
So besides recruitment, what is the most challenging task for a procurement leader? For instance, what is the most challenging task for you right now in your current position?
Okay, I mean, in the current position, of course, it is the money. Okay, it is the sell-hope. It is getting let's say, very good conditions, or similar conditions like the big retailers, or without having even without having 1% of the volumes you can order. I mean, this is something which is the most challenging. How can you let the companies deliver to each of our warehouses we have everywhere in the cities? And that's why I guess that's the most challenging part of it. How to convince the big players on the market to deliver attractive prices to the product, actually.
Yeah,
that's my personal, very challenging.
No, I can relate to that. Trust me. Get the big players to trust a small startup. Yes, I can do that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then to the first part of your question, actually, it's the most challenging is probably being accepted at eye level with the other executive. Okay, still many people believe that everybody can buy, as they do in the supermarkets, and there also I remember a very good statement of a former CEO which I had. I was like typical, the typical. Hey, you play the bad cop, and I'm the good cop. And that's why I was in an elevator with the CEO, and he told me that sentence as well. Hey, Aslan, how was doing? Yeah, good bad cop, I'm good cop. And then, hey, I told him that he can ask his wife to play the bad cop if he wants. And I don't need to play. I know what I want and how to convince the suppliers. He frowned slightly and smiled a little bit sheepishly, and the door of the elevator opened. So. That was a typical really example where most of the executives have always the same, and nobody would say that, for example, to a marketing guy. Nobody would say that to a financial guy, or nobody would say that to a CIO, for example. It's always like everybody, must be I'm easy. I mean, I'm going to the supermarket and buy. Okay, that's why, and seeing on TV and the Hollywood movies, bad cop, good cop, and it's always that. Okay. Yes, this is the most challenging to explain, or let's say to having also on that eye level. I mean, nobody would answer to the CEO, go and ask your wife. Okay, so you have to have also this let's say how do you call it, the standing really, and also believe in yourself in order to have such an answer to your own CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's time for the takeaway. So if there was one thing that you want our listeners to remember from that conversation, what would that be?
I guess, especially that's for that recruitment, for procurement, don't believe what you read. Just believe what you personally see or hear, or reactions you are faced with in an interview or a video call. So take your time to find the right role or right person for the position you need in order to have an effective team, and not just fill up the vacancy because you're looking now already for 8 weeks. Because that's a takeaway. It's better to wait.
Yeah. It's all about mindset fit with your teams and yourself. And attitude. I think it's a very good way to summarize what we've said in that conversation. Thank you, Aslan. Thank you for your time. That was very interesting, and I'm sure that our listener will be as you were mentioning before. I think that they will feel that they are not losing their time. Thank you.
Hope so. Okay. Thank you also. Goodbye.
So now it's your turn to tell us about your experience and new challenges when hiring the right profile for your procurement group in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to be notified when a new episode is out. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if that's the case, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. So happy sourcing to you all, and au revoir.
And that's a wrap for this episode of our Procurement Game Changers series. But we'll soon be back with yet another exciting session with one of the movers and shakers from the procurement space. Meanwhile, remember to visit our website at consultingquest.com for more consulting updates and procurement know-how, and join us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Until then, goodbye from the entire Consulting Quest family. Have a great day.